It's a pleasure to be here today. I am learning a lot about German education, and I'm delighted to share with you some of the insights I may be able to bring about education in the US. In the last few years, we have been talking much about education, about whether we should continue to educate children the way we have been doing for the last 200 or 300 years, yeah. And I think a good question to ask is, what is the purpose of education? Has the purpose of education changed in any way? Why are we talking about changing the way children learn and we teach and changing our schools? And I think that at least when I was growing up, we thought that the purpose of education was to help people decide what they were going to do when they grew up. And it just seems like this concept of the purpose of education was a bit isolating. It was just about me deciding what I was going to do when I grew up. And we had a pretty rigid idea of the kinds of things people might be able to do in society. So it was more about just deciding what you would do and the function in society. But the problem with this view is that what you see in this slide is a short list of some of the challenges my colleagues in the US think our students and us, because somebody just told me, I think the 21st century just came of age this year. It's 18 years since we arrived to the 21st century, right? And the world has changed significantly, and technology has played a big part in that. Technology has made the world very small. We are constantly aware of everything that is happening in many places at the same time. But it's not just technology, it's also the vast numbers of human beings that are moving across the world, the concept of nations and our ideas of what law should be or how things should happen has changed forever because we're facing challenges we had never faced before. In this context, perhaps our vision of what education should provide has changed forever. And very briefly, I'm just going to give you a synopsis of what are some of the challenges we're facing in the US in education. And I want to point your attention to the first one on the right. Education is political. And this makes no sense, but it actually makes sense in the American system because of the way education is funded in the US. Each individual state legislator decides how much money there will be for education. And in addition to that, there's big pockets of money that are decided in the federal offices about how to invest the money. But in all the other problems that we have, there's a tendency toward the privatization of education, which is a big problem. If democracy depends on an educated citizen group, then how does not privatizing public education make any sense? But because of lack of quality in the schools or inequality in the schools, some schools are very good, some are very bad, some schools there's increasing diversity, some parents want to protect their children. There's a trend towards homeschooling and privatizing education. There's more problems, something that didn't used to happen so much in the US. The US is a country of immigrants. I'm an immigrant in the US, and almost everybody in the US is second generation or third generation immigrant. But recently, there have been problems with assimilation of immigrants. This is now a global problem. Now almost every country in the developed world has the problem of immigrant assimilation. So these are challenges, right, that we're facing as educators. There's great inequity in our public education system. In addition, in the US, we have a big problem with a focus on assessment, perhaps because of the very large scale of our education system and our inability to control the quality. The government has tended to focus too much on end-of-course exams, a single grade to determine whether the quality of the education in a school is measuring up to the needs, which is a big problem because, of course, we as educators know this is not a good measure of whether education is effective or not. So that's just an idea, very briefly, of some of the challenges people in the US may be facing, and some of the problems that we have in education are stemming from this context, right? But the consequences for us is that the children that are poor, the children whose parents didn't graduate from school perhaps, The children of immigrants that are learning language are also the children that don't have access to technology, don't have access to the world, don't have access to a global perspective. And so the difference between the middle class and the working class is becoming insurmountable. And it's reaching a point where we are really creating a world that it's not very conducive to democracy. One of the biggest things that we thought as educators is that our job is to figure out how to educate every single child, regardless of their background, regardless of the background the parents have, or the access they may have to technology or travel or global information. And so that is our goal, because if we cannot engage every child and make sure every child has opportunities, then our democracy is not going to survive. This is a brief quote about a famous educator in the US, but the point here is that it just seems to me that as experts in curriculum, we continue to add more information to the curriculum, and we've forgotten that education is not data, it's not accumulation of content. Education is much more than that. And so I think we're having these conversations because we know that our job is to actually teach students how to learn, to get them started so that they can learn forever. Because we don't really know what's going to happen in the future and what kind of world they're going to live in. The curriculum cannot be a program that tells you everything a child needs to learn. It has to be a focus on skills so that they can continue to learn forever. And so, but you know, definition, I think it was Einstein who said definition of madness is continuing to do the same thing and then be surprised because you get the same outcome. We know we can't continue to teach the way we always taught because the world has changed, and what our children will face in the next 20 or 30 years, we don't know what that's going to look like. The best we can do is prepare them so they are equipped to manage their own destiny. So I want to remind you, I was an educator for many years. In the last job at Houston, I was a director of educational technology for 5 years. And every time I got discouraged because of all the problems we had, I would go to a school. And I was inspired all over again. If you go to elementary school, what I see, and I remember I would see the joy in the faces of the children and the love of learning and the curiosity. And I would remember my own children when they were little and how much they loved to learn. And then you go to the middle school and you begin to see a little bit of, some children are still happy to be there, some not so much. And very unfortunately, in many cases, when you get to the high school, they have learned to sit down and shut up. It's very unfortunate, right? But we are here because we know that that's not education. We know that education is hope, curiosity, excitement, and love and commitment. And obviously, we are in education because we love all this. We didn't get to education to make money. I don't think so. We would have been bankers otherwise, right? So what will it take to make a better educational system and to prepare the children for a better world? What it would take is to set aside bureaucratic petty wars, to work together as teams, to collaborate, I love the title of this conference, to lead in dialogue, because it will take more than a single head to solve the problem. It will have to be all our heads thinking together and all the different skills we bring to the table to build a better educational system and to let our children dream, right? So we have to define success. We have to get together and think about what success looks like. What is the face like of that child when they finish high school and they graduate and they're ready for life? What does that look like? And more importantly, we have to forget about working in isolation. The students, the academic experts, the school leaders, the technology experts have to work together. In Houston, the technology floor was separate from the curriculum floor. We never went up and down the steps until we started working together. The reason why we're here is because we don't want any child to lose hope. We want all of them to be able to dream and to pursue that dream that they have for life. Finally, I want to tell you a very brief story. When President Johnson was visiting NASA, the Johnson Space Center in Houston, he ran into a janitor. The janitor are the people that clean the floors. And President Johnson stopped and asked the janitor what was his job. What was his job in NASA? And the janitor stood up and said, "My job is to put a man in the moon. And so I think I went from Houston to work for itslearning. I came to work for itslearning because I believe every single person that works in itslearning, our job is to help build that school of the future that we're dreaming of. Thank you very much.